So we are not a news show. Actually, we're not entirely sure what kind of show this is, but this is a strange time, and we're not here to vomit platitudes at you. And if the question is, how do we address some of the systemic racism that plagues our society, the honest answer is, we don't know. Some observations. I believe that the data reflects that racism in this country is getting better or less bad, so to speak. And I think the data supports that, whether it's the number of people of color elected to Congress, the number who are police chiefs, or the number of women attending college. The arc of justice is curved, but it does bend toward justice in this country. The problem, the kerosene here that ignites on the sparks of some just horrific events and abuse by the police in this country is income inequality. Simply put, the top 1% in our country now make more than the bottom 80%. This gross idolatry of the dollar and the underbelly of a meritocracy where we have decided that billionaires deserve to be billionaires and pay a lower tax rate, and that poor people also deserve to be poor, is in fact the disease that infects our nation. Until there's a greater comity of man, until we decide to be effective as opposed to just proving to each other that we're right. And by the way, and I recognize that I will come across as a boomer and a get off my lawn 50-something-year-old guy, but it doesn't escape me that when I watch these protests, that a lot of young people are infected by the same problem I've struggled with my entire life. And that is the difference between being right and being effective. And you need to understand that CNN and Fox will only highlight the most incendiary, most upsetting moments in these protests. The way we're effective, simply put, is if you think there is a prosecutor that is not standing up to systemic racism, then canvass for his or her opponent. If you believe we have elected representatives that are doing but nothing but borrowing from future generations to flatten the curve for rich people, then support the opposition. If you believe we have a dangerous imbecile in the White House who swaps out gasoline for water when there's a fire, then vote. There is nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with America. See above, vote. First off, our rant. The Amazon River in South America is the largest river by discharge in the world, with 7.5 million cubic feet flowing through it per second. 7.5 million cubic feet of discharge. That's why you come to the dog. Anyways, but even the powerful flow of the Amazon can switch directions. Millions of years ago, the Amazon flowed in the opposite direction it does today. Much like the reversal of the Amazon, trends can completely invert despite how permanent they may seem. As we know, COVID is an impetus for major change. One major reversal incited by the pandemic is the newfound disadvantage to living in cities. People have been flocking to cities for the past 30 years. Urban crime has been decreasing since the 80s. Cities have been the hottest places for economic and social opportunity. Today, approximately 83% of Americans live in cities, up from 64% in 1950. But COVID overnight has turned density from a feature into a bug. The river has reversed. 39% of U.S. urban dwellers said the COVID crisis has prompted them to consider leaving for a less crowded place. It's no surprise that the wealthy have been the ones who have been able to flee. Affluent neighborhoods, including Soho, the West Village, Morningside Heights, the Upper East Side, Gramercy, and Brooklyn Heights, have emptied by more than 40% since the beginning of the shutdown. That's approximately equal to the percentage of New Yorkers that drink coffee every day. Think about that. Everyone who drinks coffee suddenly overnight vacates the island. If we assumed 40% vacate Manhattan neighborhoods, this would equate to removing approximately 600,000 people, more than the population of the state of Wyoming. Kind of a weak flex. I didn't know anyone lived in Wyoming. Anyways, side note, the state of Wyoming has less than 600,000 people, but 2 senators. And by the way, California with 40 million people, also, let me think, 2 senators. That makes sense. Anyways, people in cities are conducting 33 times the number of searches for new types of housing than people who don't live in cities. And outdoor space is now a key search term across all audiences. And some industries are less tethered to location than others. A recent survey of New York tech and finance workers found that 69% said they would leave New York permanently if they were given the option to work from home. Think about that. 2/3 of people in the city would leave if they were afforded the opportunity. So the conventional wisdom here, the first order, is that Manhattan gets really hard. Yes, it might, but the singular cocktail of grit, culture, creativity, and glamour survives. In sum, New York, the city, is fabulous and will not be crushed. Its surrounding nondescript suburbs, whose primary value is or was proximity, absolutely crushed. It's not that people who live in the city will leave, it's people that work in the city and live in a nearby suburb are going to be the ones that leave. Manhattan is worth it. Short Hills, New Jersey, and Greenwich, Connecticut, not so much. While some people who live in the city will leave, the real rush to the exits will be people who work in the city but live in a nondescript suburb. When people can work from anywhere, the continued winners will be low-tax, high-sunshine states. The most popular mail forwarding location outside of New York for Manhattan residents was Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, almost 2,000 mail forwarding requests and counting. Google searches for Florida public schools spiked in mid-March, with a significant volume of searches from Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and any other place that's really cold with high taxes. Home prices in Greenwich, Connecticut, get this, are down 24% since last year. And this trend makes complete sense. Think about an individual family's choices. Mom, Tanya, works in law, raking in $600,000 a year. Go, Tanya. Tanya equals player. Dad, Danny, works as a VP of marketing, making $300,000. Also a player, by the way, a lot of players in and around Manhattan. They are crushing it, both going into New York City 4 to 5 times per week. They live in Greenwich, Connecticut with 2 kids, but now they can both work remote. And so Tanya and Danny begin noticing that high income tax and $40,000 per kid they spend on private school, plus all the commuting costs. Proximity to New York City now has little value. Tanya and Danny are about to give themselves a raise by moving to Boca Raton. What do they save? $54,000 in annual income tax, $13,000 on mortgage payments, $50,000 on tuition for their kids, and $100,000 on general spending, not to mention the weather. Therefore, in housing, schooling, spending, and income tax, Tanya and Danny save almost $250,000 per year. And if they're hoping to buy real estate for the same $3 million they would have paid in Connecticut, they can get a mansion or a McMansion in Florida for half the price, immediately unlocking $1.5 million to invest in, say, I don't know, an unregulated monopoly like Amazon or Apple or Facebook or Google. Kaboom, Danny and Tanya, come to the sunshine, come to the dog. If you are Danny and Tanya, the financial upside is indisputable. There are astronomically large second-order effects to the movement we will see here. One second-order effect, politics. Show me a college-educated New Yorker or someone in Montclair, New Jersey, or someone who has the resources to move from Greenwich, Connecticut to Delray Beach, and I'll show you a Democrat. Trump won Texas by 800,000 votes. 8.5 million people live in New York City, and 40% of them are considering leaving. It would only take 9% of Manhattanites to relocate in order to potentially go blue. It would take even less in Florida. Trump won by a margin of 112,000 votes. It would take less than 1% of Manhattanites to relocate in order to potentially go blue. We are looking at a massive migration of people in the near future. The reversal of a river is no small event. And now on to our guest lecturer, Professor Nouriel Roubini. He's one of the only economists who have properly predicted the 2008 subprime mortgage meltdown before it happened. Nicknamed Dr. Doom, Professor Roubini continues to make news and headlines. And more importantly, Nouriel is a colleague and a friend. Professor Roubini, you have said that you think that things are going to be fine to okay for a year to 2 years, but we're headed towards a depression. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are 10 trends in the global economy that were already underway between the global financial crisis and today, and are each exacerbated by this coronavirus crisis. And these 10 deadly drivers of doom, disaster, are going to lead us to a greater depression by the middle of this decade.
And what do you think is the canary in the coal mine here? And I know it's difficult to predict. Where is COVID-19 the spark? Is this the beginning, if you will, of our descent? Is it a fiscal crisis? And where do you think it's most likely to start? Where's the first domino to fall?
First of all, we're going to see a wave of defaults. Many corporations, many households, many small businesses are going to go bankrupt. We're going to get significant amounts of social and political instability already these years with the U.S. elections. It's going to be a nasty campaign. I live in New York, and in my neighborhood there was violence all weekend. Windows of stores, banks, supermarkets that are being smashed all over my neighborhood. It's not just about the murder of George Floyd. There are now 40 million people that are unemployed in 3 months. We created 20 million jobs in 10 years. We destroyed 40 million in 3 months. These people are young, they're millennials, they're Gen X, they don't have income, they don't have jobs, they're informally employed, and they're angry.
Yeah, it seems as if, and this is, I think, an age-old truism, there's nothing more dangerous than a young, broke, angry male. And all of a sudden, there are tens of millions more of them in America, and I imagine hundreds of millions more around the world. If you were advising central bankers or the leadership across Western democracies, what 2 or 3 things do you think, what policy recommendations would you have to attempt to either avert or lessen the impact or the likelihood we enter into a full-scale depression?
Well, I think the train has left the station, and I think these deadly drivers of a greater depression probably cannot be stopped at this point, where the decade we did not much about it. But at least in terms of the policy response to this crisis, I think you have to help Main Street rather than Wall Street.
Nielsen tells us we have this incredibly male, incredibly young viewership. What one piece of advice would you give to your 25 or your 35-year-old self?
I think that even more than nature or luck, there is certainly luck, but there is also hard work. If you read the book by Malcolm Gladwell about outliers, 95% of success, he claims, is not coming from being born with good genes, but actually working hard.
Nouriel, keep stirring it up. Keep teaching my brother. Keep fighting the good fight.
Great being with you today, Scott.
Thanks, Nouriel. Look forward to seeing you on campus. That's a lie. We never see each other on campus. I mean, never. Anyways, up next on No Mercy, No Malice, our winners and losers, including Elon Musk's big win. And if you think it's a rocket ship, you're wrong. You're wrong. Anyways, also, MSNBC business anchor and correspondent Stephanie Ruhle is here, and she is bringing the fire. Stay tuned. We'll be right here. Let's get to our winners and losers for the week. A winner, Killer Mike's speech to Atlanta protesters. The Run and Jewels rapper and son of an Atlanta police officer urged protesters of George Floyd's death for peace. He called for people to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize.
We don't want to see one officer charged. We want to see 4 officers prosecuted and sentenced. We don't want to see targets burning. We want to see the system that sets up for systemic racism burnt to the ground.
This was emotional. It was raw. This is what leadership looks like. A winner, The Boring Company. SpaceX has been Musk's project that has received the most press, but an underreported win for Mr. Musk is his underground tunnel construction service, The Boring Company. Musk has a vision to solve the infuriating issue of traffic by constructing underground tunnels that expedite transportation. His loop in the Northeast intends to enable travel from New York to D.C. in less than 30 minutes. If he can pull this off, it would revolutionize commuting. It's the boring stuff that creates shareholder value and changes people's lives. You want to save millions of years. You want to give people more time with their families. Yeah, build tunnels. Don't put them on Mars. A winner, Disney's innovation concerning sporting events. The NBA announced that they're engaged in conversations with Disney regarding restarting the NBA season in late July at Disney Sport Complex in Florida as an NBA campus for games, practices, and housing. The entire Disney complex is roughly 40 square miles with nearly 24,000 hotel rooms owned or operated by Disney within the campus. They could offer a controlled and vaccinated environment. This is, in a word, genius. To bring home winners and losers, let's bring in our friend, NBC News senior business correspondent and MSNBC anchor, Stephanie Ruhle. Thank you. This must be a crazy busy time for you. Let's bust right into it. So if you went on MSNBC or the Today Show and consistently promoted conspiracy theories or promoted ideas that resulted in harm or violence, Comcast would be liable. And the president has actually talked about, in some sort of weird form of retribution, removing legislation that shields these quote unquote nascent technology companies, or at least they were nascent when the legislation was put in place. Do you think it's a good idea what the president is proposing, that we in fact remove the legislation from '97 and that these companies become liable for their content?
These companies should be liable. And here's why, Scott. They are advertising platforms.
Right.
When NBC News loses advertising dollars, we're not losing them to another TV network. We're losing them to social media platforms. Yeah. And I don't disagree that they're different from what we are, but they need to be regulated just the same. And I don't necessarily put the blame on the president, because guess what? The last administration, do you know what industry they were romanced by? These very companies. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah. A few weeks ago, you and I were texting back and forth, and you literally said the pitchforks are coming out. And to a certain extent, you predicted this. Do you think this is really about systemic racism or more about income inequality? What is it that has sickened our society to the point that we can end up getting curfew alerts on our phone? What is your view? You're covering this day and night right now. Do you have any thoughts that you don't think are getting the oxygen from the media they deserve?
It's all of it. I still don't understand how the government isn't focused on oversight, okay? We have got America that has been locked up in their houses, shut down their businesses for weeks. And people like me have the benefit, who have more white-collar jobs, to work from home, or live in a community where our groceries can get sent to us. We have all the benefits. We work in industries that has all the influence over government. And so how did we not expect to see this outrage when weeks are going by? People don't get to go to their school, their community center, their church, or to work. Or if they do go to work because they're an essential worker, they're putting their lives at risk. And we're not even acknowledging this. We're saying, oh, we've got these small business loans, they're good enough. Scott, we reported a story on Friday. Let me just explain this to people for a moment. That a private jet company, okay, took small business money from the government meant for small businesses hurting, suffering, restaurants down 80% in revenue. A private jet company didn't just take the money from the government. You know what they did with it? They then funneled it, because it's a pass-through company, to the billionaires who own private jets. Are you kidding me? That's where our government money is going? And I'm not saying that the government program was designed to screw the poor and hook up the rich. But people are watching day in and day out. They're not going back to work. Their public pool isn't open. Their school isn't open. And then people at the high end are getting back to their own private wealthy lives. And people are angry. They're not just angry with the president, and they're not saying, well, we just need to vote somebody else in. They're saying the system doesn't work for me, and it never has.
One of the things I love about what you're doing, Stephanie, is you do take time out to talk about optimistic things that are not boring, but aren't, don't involve Molotov cocktails or acts of violence. And I think it's important that we have voices, raging moderate voices, that talk about some of the good things. And 99% of the stuff out there I do think is good or bends towards justice. So keep on keeping on, sister, and stay safe.
You too. Thanks,
you.
Have
Stephanie.
a good day.
Good to see you. Still ahead on No Mercy, No Malice, our algebra of happiness, what being rich really means. This is No Mercy, No Malice. I'm Professor Scott Galloway. Let's end with a math lesson, my algebra of happiness. Our strategy and equations for living a better life from my second book, The Algebra of Happiness. We don't get many opportunities to start over, but COVID-19 affords us a chance to. It's turned our lives upside down like an Etch-a-Sketch that has been shook, presenting a chance to reimagine the way we live, whether we like it or not. My colleague, Professor Adam Alter, has done research on the regrets of the dying. That is what people look back and say, this is what I would have liked to have changed, as they have the perspective being near death. One of the biggest regrets, people not living the life they wanted to lead, but the lives others chose for them. In 2000, I hit the restart button and left a lot behind: my marriage, my career, and San Francisco. It was a lonely period rife with collateral damage. But hard decisions enable a more rewarding life, while easy decisions make for a hard life. COVID-19 presents each of us with the opportunity to design a more rewarding life. and to become wealthier in ways that matter. When I say rich, I mean free and financially independent. The definition of rich, when your passive income exceeds your burn. Case in point, my father makes $48,000 from Social Security and his pension from the Royal Navy. He spends $40,000. He is rich. In contrast, I have close friends making several million a year at investment banks who, between alimony, child support, a second home in the Hamptons, and the absurd signals of wealth to attract the next mate, spend it all. They are poor. Many seemingly rich people often have sleepless nights staring at their ceiling, wondering what happens if and when the music stops. They are poor. Boys focus on their top line income. Men focus on their burn. There is a dignity to living below your means and substituting time with loved ones for things. I asked philosopher and neuroscientist Sam Harris for one piece of advice on how to be a better man. He offered that rather than trying to parent, cajole, discipline, or guide your children, your real purpose is just to love them. This takes time and likely a trade-off, maybe less shit, less stuff. My sons, like many kids, are having a difficult time with Corona, not having the structure of school or time with friends. So I'm trying to spend less time correcting, explaining, arguing, and more time just loving. I am spending more time yelling, I've noticed that, but I am trying to spend more time just loving, sitting in their room when they're doing homework, talking and watching the Wonder Years and The Simpsons together. A key component of a path to a better life is regularly assessing what we leave behind. The fastest path to a better world is more engaged fathers, not a better phone. Let's be better men by living more examined lives and spending our most valuable asset, time, on what and who really matters. We'll see you next week. All right, guys, well done. Well done. Come on in. Come on back.